بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Let's continue talking about ERD. We have discussed, probably you were not there last time, but we have discussed the different constituents or different elements of the ERD. We said we have the entity types and attributes describing the entity types, and there are relationships relating entity types together. And last time we have defined what's a relationship. We start talking about relationships. What's a relationship? The types of relationships: one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many relationships. Also, we talked about the degree of a relationship. It might be a binary relationship in which we use just a single line, a line. No arrows in the line, just a line connecting two entity types together, two boxes together. Every relationship has a label, name, usually a verb, so that we can read a sentence easily and properly. It's readable. It makes a sentence. Noun, verb, noun. And mapping this to what we have done when we said informal description of data requirements. You remember the forms and how converting the forms into informal descriptions. There was the title of the relationship, right? The short description. This is exactly what we can get from the ERD. Noun, verb, noun. This is a sentence, a readable sentence, a meaningful sentence. Okay? So we said that we have binary relationships, or for simple, let us call it higher order relationships. And for higher order relationship, higher degree relationships. So we have binary and the higher degree. Higher degree means ternary, quaternary, and so on. So meaning that the relationship relates not only two, but many. Maybe three, maybe four. Let me show you just to remember. عشان بس تراجع، بس عايزينك تنتظم في الحضور. We said that the simple way of representing a relationship is just a line, straight line with a verb here, so the sentence is meaningful. If we have more than two relationships, two entities related together, then we use the diamond, the rhombus, and it carries the label. Now remind me, we said that this rhombus is used for one of three reasons, or the three together. What are these reasons? When we can use, or it is recommended when it is recommended to use the rhombus. Three reasons.
There is more than two.
Yes, that's higher degree. Higher degree relationships having more than two entities related together. Halati.
And the relationship itself has attributes.
If it carries attributes. So the attribute does not relate to any of the entities, but it relates to the relationship. And we gave an example for this, just to recall. We discussed this example. Let me make it bigger. Discuss this example. So we said that, for example, point by the mouse. The supply is a relationship that says that the supplier supplies these parts to that project. So this is how to read it. Okay? So now, what is the quantity of how many parts are supplied? So it doesn't specify the supplier. It doesn't specify the part. It doesn't specify the project. It specifies when this relationship occurs, when the supply itself occurs. When we do the supply, it happened that it is by this quantity. We can also add an attribute like date. So when the supply occurred, it is done or occurred at this date. So the date is not belonging to the supplier. It's not belonging to the project or the parts. But it is to the supply process itself, to the action itself, to the relationship. So this is the time to place an attribute to the relationship, not to the entity types. Now a line cannot carry an attribute. So we use this diamond or this rhombus. Question?
We can also add an attributes like the shipment ID or something.
Yeah, many attributes, yes. What's the third reason? The many-to-many. We said that the many-to-many could be used simply using a line. Yeah, yes, we still can use the line to represent a many-to-many relationship, but it's not recommended. It's better to use the diamond. Why? Let us defer the answer to the next lecture, or maybe the lecture after. Next chapter we will discuss how to relate, why do we need it to look like a diamond. This will make it easier when we go and convert this conceptual diagram into a logical model, into tables and relational database. It will be easier if we see it like a diamond. So we have three reasons. I'd like you to remember them all the time. Higher degree relationships,
The relationship that has
carries attributes, and many-to-many relationships. Okay? We stopped at this example, and this was the last one. We say that these two models, Model A and Model B, these are two different ERDs, they are not equivalent. Why they are not equivalent? Because there are some questions that could be answered by one model and not the other model. And I ask you to find one of these questions. Do you get any?
Yes.
Yeah.
If we want to know how much of the parts shipped to the project.
Of course, yes. So what are the shipments done for a certain project? What are the quantities of this part shipped by this supplier to this specific project? All of these are questions that cannot be answered by the second model, because all the model tells, the second model tells, is just this supplier supplies to what? Supplies to which project? Supplies to which projects? This supplier supplies which parts? This project uses which parts? And so on. But it doesn't tell anything about the shipments. So the shipments are done like this. So if you want to add shipments to this model, you have to add this supply relationship to this model. There is another example. I left this for you to study it, and we said we have instructor, semester, and course with these attributes. By the way, what this attribute is? Semester year.
It's a key.
It is the key, but it is also composite attribute.
Composite.
It's composite. It's composed of many parts. Two parts here. So we have many relationships connecting the three entity types together. I gave you this to you as a homework. Now let's continue. is that all about the relationships? Relationship type, relationship degree? No, there is one very important issue regarding the relationship. Remember when we were talking about the informal description, we wrote the title of the relationship, and then there was a line below it, right? In which we said what? Each one of this is related to how many of this, and vice versa. How many of this related to how many of this, right? So this is what we call it multiplicity. This is, we haven't seen how to represent this yet. Called I will discuss it, and I'm going to go back to this later on. But let us finish first the multiplicity. We call it multiplicity. You talk about the multiplicity. Multiplicity means numbering. How many of this relates to how many of this? And in fact, this is what defines the one-to-one, one-to-many, the type, and many-to-many. So let's see how it works. I give you an example first and then come back to this. We have something called, let me have an example. Let us, if I have here department, and we have employee or staff, we want to relate those together, okay? So we have the department has, this is the relationship, has. So now the multiplicity says how many, how to relate in terms of numbers, how to relate those two entity types in terms of numbers. Remember the occurrence diagram, right? So if we draw sets like this is D1 and D2 and D3. This is S1, S2, S3, S4, and so on. So now I say that D1 has S1 and S2 working for it. Right? We have also D2 having S3 working for it, and D3 has S4 working for it. Now, each one of the, let's ask ourselves this question, and we'll ask the question going both sides. So first of all, we pick one side, department, and we say, okay, how many staff are related to each department? So we say each department, the one department, look, so we look here. One department has how many staff linked to it? We don't say two, this is just an example. We might have hundreds of these staff. So many, right? So we say that each department has many staff. I'm coming into this later on. But how many are related? When we are saying how many, we specify two numbers: the minimum number and the maximum number. The minimum number is called participation, and the maximum is called cardinality. Okay, so these are the two terms: cardinality and participation. So let us see. So each department has many staff. Many, we express many as a star. Or as I said before, it could be the letter M. Both are okay, but let us use star. This is the minimum or the maximum number?
This is
The maximum number. Many. You don't put a ceiling. You don't have a limit. Many. Huh? So you ask yourself, how about the minimum? Can it have zero staff, meaning the department does not have any employees working for it? No. Okay? So the minimum number will be 1. I'm sorry, I'm writing here. Each department has how many staff? So we read it this way. Each department having how many staff, huh? So it says from 1 to star. Has at least 1 employee up to many. So this is the minimum, this is the maximum. This is the participation, this is the cardinality. Okay? And now we move to the other side, the other direction. Each staff is connected to how many, or works for how many departments. So look at here. Each staff, only 1 link coming out of each one of those, right? So we say, okay, S1 has how many departments? S2, S3, everybody is linked to. So to the maximum a staff can be linked to a department is 1. The maximum departments, the maximum number of departments a staff can work for is 1. What's the minimum? Look, I used 2 dots on the same horizontal, on the same line, not above each other. Not a colon, but it is the colon معناها كده, huh? We use dots like this. What's the minimum? Can it be 0? No. If a staff has to belong to a certain department. So I use 1 like this. So the minimum is 1, the maximum is 1.
I think it depends on the user itself. He can specify the department.
Yeah, of course. All the analysis comes from the user. But we are just discussing. So a staff does not belong to a department. If the user says that, that's fine. This is just a mini word. 1 mini word that can be like this. Although I don't imagine a staff doesn't work for a department, works for what?
Or the opposite department itself.
Okay, it depends on the mini word. It depends on the mini word. So in this case, we write it this way. If both cardinality and participation are equal, like this case, we write what? It's sufficient to write 1. 1, only 1 number means that both are the same, the minimum and the maximum. Let's have another example. Instead of the relationship has, let's have another relationship managed. Is managed by, is managed by. Why? Because we read it this direction. So a department is managed by staff. So the occurrence diagram will look something different, right? Because let us redraw it. This S1 manage D1. Let me assume this. And S3 manage D2. And let's have many here, S5, S6, and so on. Let's assume S6 manage D3. Right? Now, if this is the case, how can we write the participation and cardinality, the multiplicity? So let us go one direction. Each department, we ask ourselves, the one department, each department, and we write here. If we go from this side, moving this direction, so we start by 1 here, the 1 here, and we write the multiplicity at that side, right? so that the sentence will be easily readable. So we'll say each department is managed by how many staff, right? So this is makes it readable, huh? The verb comes before the numbers. So we write the participation and cardinality here, the multiplicity. So let's ask ourselves that each department is managed by how many staff?
One.
It's one, right?
But at least in this example.
But it could be, is there anyone that's not connected?
No.
No. So each department must have one manager. Each department must have one manager. Must have means what? Means that zero is not acceptable.
Right.
We don't allow a department without a manager. So the minimum is one, but the maximum, how many managers? Could be two managers managing the same department. We're saying that no department is not managed, does not have a manager. That's the minimum, right? But then the other question, is it allowed for 2, 3, 4 managers to manage the same department? Or it has to be one? It has to be one, right? So according to this, so it is 1, 2, 1.
You can make it one.
This is, yes, of course, we can write it as 1. Now go the other way around. Each staff, the one staff, is managing. He's a manager for, or manages how many departments?
We should make the arrow, right?
No arrows.
No, I mean if...
No. It's written like this, but I'm making the trip for me to understand. So I'm asking each staff, this relationship is written this way because you read it this way. Right, so you don't need to have a, but now I'm coming to from this side. So each one of the staff manage how many departments? The staff manage one department. But does he have to manage a department? Every one of the staff in our company is a manager? Of course not. Managers. Of course it's not. So some of the staff are not managers. Some of the staff.
Just employees.
So if I'm talking of S1, but S1 is linked to one department as a manager, right? But how about S2? It's not linked. It's linked to 0 departments. So S1 is linked to one department. S2 is linked to 0 departments, right? So can S1 or any of these staff members be linked to more than one? We said no. So the maximum is 1 and the minimum is 0 because S2 does not link. So it is 0. So we write it this way, 0 to 1. Okay?
Always the minimum in the left.
Yeah, 0 to 1, 1 to 1. Yes, we write it participation. Cardinality. Now if you take the cardinality here and the cardinality here, it determines the type of the relationship. 1 to 1, 1 to many, and so on. So this is 1 to 1, sorry. 1 to 1.
So the cardinality
Cardinality, the highest number. Yes, the cardinality is the one that we use for determining the type. Got it? Any question, Hikayati? Let me this. Let me go back to here and do this example together. And I'd like to, okay. So remember we started our this chapter having these examples, and I discussed one of them and left the others to you. When we have a description from the user that says the department, we have an entity type called department, and we need to keep track of the name of the department, the number of the department, manager who manage this department, the locations, and he has multiple locations here, and the start date of the manager. We also he also told us that we have projects, and each project is identified by a name and a number, and it has locations, and it is controlled by a certain department. The employee has all of these attributes. And there is something called dependent. Dependents are the sons and daughters of or wife of the employee. And these are the attributes. Now what I want to do is to, having this description, it described what? It described how, what are the entities and what are the attributes. Where are the relationships? Where are the relationships? Let me go back for you to capture this. Let me do the exercise from the beginning. Let us read the sentences and try to see why or how this happened. Okay? Let me. Okay. Just to remind me, I remind you how it works, and this, let us take this as the first exercise for us, how to build ERDs out of user interviews. Okay. So now the user says this sentence: the company is organized in 2 departments. And then, actually, when we read these scripts, we look for nouns. The entity types are nouns, right?
Yes.
The attributes are nouns. The relationships are verbs. Relationship are verbs, right? So we look in the sentence to the nouns and the verbs. The nouns will make the entity types or the attributes, and the verbs will make the relationships. So this is how I can identify the basic elements of an ERD. Okay? But should we use every noun as an entity or as an attribute? This question will be answered in a minute. Now let us start reading. The company is organized into departments. This is a meaningful sentence, right? It says the company, noun, is organized into verb or verbal phrase, departments. So should we use what? What can we identify out of this sentence? What are the entity types? How about the company?
The company who will use the program. That's what he said.
Exactly. That's a good point. Some student get confused. It says, okay, this is a reasonable or a meaningful sentence, has 2 nouns and a verb. So it says that we have 2 entity types and a relationship. So you might consider the company as an entity type, the department as another entity type, and they are related together using the verb is organized into. This is possible, but it's not correct. Why? Be with me. عايزك تركز دلوقتي معي. Not every noun is considered as an entity type. So how can I tell? Okay. What we are doing, let us go back to the actual reasons, actual situation, the real situation we are working on. What we are doing. What is ERD? What's ERD? This is the interview. The interview. These sentences are obtained from the interview. Now I'm going to do what? ERD. What's an ERD? Conceptual model. Remember, conceptual model. So we are doing a model, right? Model of what? To model what? To model a many word, right? The many word that we need to identify what are the data required for this many word. So we are modeling a many word, right? We are not modeling the whole word. Just a many word, part of the word. So this means that there are larger words, that this is part of it, right? So we need to be very, very focused. We need to understand what are the boundaries of my many word. Scope. What is the scope of this many word? Huh? So I'm going to ask myself, are those nouns, if I consider those nouns as entity types, so are they within the scope of my many word or outside of the scope of my many word? So if I consider the many word as a circle, so is this noun inside the circle or outside the circle? So as Saad said, he said, okay, the company is not inside the many word. Why? Because it owns the many word. It is the owner of the many word. It is the company that we are going to build a database for. We are going to build the database for the company. So the company is not part of the model, part of the many word. It is the owner of the many word. So you have to be careful when you are looking at the nouns. So not every noun should be considered as an entity type. So this is for nouns. Now, another question. We said that nouns are entity types and attributes. So the second question will be, okay, we said that department is inside the many word, right? We are talking about a company. A company is the owner. A company is the whole thing. So what's inside department is part of it. So it's part of the many word. It is inside the scope, right? So it is. The question is it an entity type or an attribute? Both are nouns. So we have to again be careful whether this is an attribute or an entity type. Okay? So I don't know, till now I don't know. So let us keep reading. Now he said each department, which means that we have many departments. It's not one. When it says that we have many departments, it means that we need to store data. We have many of those. Remember tables?
Yes.
So the tables have many students. The table for the students, for example. We have many students. So if you have many, this means that you have a type. If you have many students, then I need to define a type for those students so that all of them are described the same way. Right? So when it says each department, I understand that each means that we have many of these departments, right? So this makes it more towards being an entity type. But let us wait. You got the point? When we have many of this, so it's most likely be an entity type. But let us wait. What are the data we need to store about entity type? If there are data to store about this entity type, this department, then it means that the department is an entity and those are the attributes. So keep reading. Each department has a name, noun. Number, a noun. But of course, these nouns describe the department. So now it's clear. Department is an entity type. Name and number name and number are attributes. Let's keep reading. That's why we defined the department as here. The department as an entity type, which has name and number as attributes. Now keep reading. And department has employee who manage the department. Manager, as a manager, right? So we used an attribute manager, or added another attribute manager, right? At that point, we assume that it is an attribute. We need to keep track of the start date of the department manager. That's why we have the start date of the manager. Locations. Keep reading. A department may have several locations. So location is another property that describes the department, that we have many values. It's multi-values. Multi-valued attribute. That's why we use the double-edged oval.
Why we didn't make the manager start date and a value for a manager? It could be, right?
But the manager is a value by itself. So, okay, you are thinking of another way of doing it. Okay, I understand, but let me... He says, okay, why not define the manager as a simple attribute? Another way of modeling it, we are doing models, so everybody can model it different way, but it gives the same meaning. Yeah, so I agree with you. You are saying, let me define manager as a composite field instead of being a simple attribute. Composite having many components. One component is the manager ID or manager name or whatever, right? Till now he didn't describe anything about the manager. Till now he didn't say anything about, but let me assume that every manager has an ID. So I can define the manager in terms of, so I would say we have a manager and we have two attributes describing, or two components, two parts describing a manager. The manager ID and the manager start date. I can do it this way as well. But because he didn't mention anything about manager, just he said manager, just a manager, didn't say what about the manager, manager name, manager, didn't mention that, so we kept it like this. But you can do it the way you, in fact, I prefer your way. Okay, this is one statement I obtained when interviewing the user. Another statement. Each department, now we already identified department as an entity type, right? So now he's talking about each department controls a number of projects, many projects. So when we say many projects, it means that we probably have an entity type projects. Each project has a unique name, unique number, and is located at a single location. So these are properties describing the project, right? Project has a name, a number, a location, and it has each department controls a number of projects. Controls a number of projects. So for this project is controlled by a certain department. That's why he is considering this as which department is controlling this project. We need to know the department who is controlling this project, right? That's why he added this. Now, let me use the board here and redraw those two. And you will be surprised. We have a project name. Why the underlines?
Because they are key.
Number. Because it says unique. Look at this. A unique name means no two departments have the same name. A unique number. No two departments have the same number. So this is unique. If it is unique, then it is a candidate key. So we place an underline to represent or to express that those two attributes are candidates. We can select one of them to be the primary key. Might be the number, might be the name. Both work for as a primary key. And we are leaving the decision which one to be a primary key to the designer. So for the analysis purpose, at the analysis stage, we need just to identify what's unique. What are the candidates? But now let's back to continue this. We have location here. And we have controlling departments. Now we also have here what? Department. The previous slide, right? I'm trying to, because the 8 types are not isolated. There must be relationships. So I'm trying to find out, is there a relationship relates those two together or not? Okay. So I'm redrawing it. So we have name and number for the department. Name, number. We have location. It is what else? Manager. We have a manager. Let me do it your style. So the manager has 2 components here. One of them is the start date. Now, those two are isolated, right? But let us see if there are ways of linking them together or not. Let me look at this. What is this? The controlling department, right? So the controlling department is a department or not a department? It is the department that's managing, that's controlling, that this project works under the control of this department, right? But it is a department. So it says what? It says that this project is related to one of these departments. Which relationship? Controlling relationship. Right? So instead of representing it as an attribute, why not I represent it as a relationship? So I say that, exactly. There is this, each project is controlled. Let me use the same sentence he wrote here. Each project, or he writes it differently. He said each department controls a number of projects. So a department controls projects, right? So let me write this way. So instead of representing it as an attribute, I represent it as a relationship. If a department controls project. Got it?
Yeah.
So if you the first moment you think of this as an attribute, something he said as an attribute, that's fine. But if this attribute is one instance, one occurrence of another entity type that's already identified or will be identified after you finish the whole exercise, then it is better not to use it as, it's not better. You have to replace it by a relationship. Let me say it again. If you, for the first minute, when you read, you think of something as an attribute, as we did here. We thought that controlling department is an attribute that describes the project. It's part of the properties of project. Which department is controlling me, right? Now we thought like this, but later on we discovered that this controlling department is a department. It's one of these departments. We already have an entity type called department, where this person here, or this occurrence here, is one of these departments. So you have to replace this attribute to a relationship, and of course choose the right name, the right label for the relationship. Got it? We will get into the participation or the multiplicity in a minute, but at least we don't need to specify it as an attribute. We specify it as a relationship. Let us keep.
We can skip the first step. We can.
Yeah, from the first. Yeah, yes, of course. But yeah, I said it. I said it clearly. I said what? I said, if you think the first moment that it is an attribute, but later on you discover, probably you have read this before you read the department, or you got it. So I didn't identify the department yet, but once I define a department, then I have to replace this attribute to a relationship. But yes, you are right, because department comes first. We know that there is a department, so we should have done this at the first place. We shouldn't have defined it like this. Let us keep working. Employee. Again, the user keeps talking and said, we store each employee's social security number. We need to store. He's describing a data about what? About something, right? About what here in the example? About employees. What are these data you need to store about employee? Social security number. Add social security number اللي هو الهوية أو الأحوال، رقم الأحوال. يبقى social security number, address, salary, sex, and birthday. These are, of course, attributes for the employee. Why? Because they are properties describing. These are the data needed to be stored about an employee. So they are attributes. We have employee with these as attributes, right? Keep reading. Each employee works for one department, so we need to define the when I say Muhammad, so Muhammad, which department you are working in, ya Muhammad? Okay? So department number, here is the department. We add it as an attribute, department. Each employee works for one department, but may work on several projects. So what are the projects you're working on? So works on many projects. Multi-valued, exactly. Works on each, on several projects. We need to keep track of the number of hours per week that an employee currently works on each project. So yeah, for each project I need to tell what are the projects you are working on, Mr. Muhammad, and how many hours per week you have worked for each project. So that's why he represented works on as a multi-valued attribute, because he works on many projects. So which project and how many hours for this project, right? We also keep track of the direct supervisor of each employee. So who is the manager? Who is the supervisor? So this is the supervisor, and we specify, where is the supervisor? Supervisor is here, right? So he said employee, and the employee has name, social number, address, salary, sex, and birth date, okay? So this is how we represent an employee, right?
He didn't specify the name and the first name.
He didn't mention the name at all. The name is not mentioned here at all. So, but let us assume it is there, and let us assume it's defined this way, just to teach you that yes, we can have a name, and the name is composite because it's composed of, just for the, yes, it has to be specified somewhere in the expert. But let us write or draw. Let us draw the employee. So we have employee here. and it has so many of the attributes. We have name, let's have it here, name, whatever the name is, composite or simple, it's not matter here. SSN, SSN, and this is unique. 6, salary, date of birth, address, let us wait. Projects. Let me start with projects. The projects he works on, right? Remember, we have a project here. So if you are now thinking of this as an attribute, but it reminds me that there is an entity of the same, or expressing the same thing, right? So instead of modeling it as an attribute, we model it as a relationship. So we have a relationship that relates the project to the employee, right? Works on. So employee works on. But because we are going bottom up, the direction here is bottom up, so we draw an arrow.
And there is a department.
Wait a minute. Works on carries an attribute, right?
So
It says how many. When this employee, Muhammad, works for project P1, how many hours?
we need the numbers.
Oh, exactly. So there is an attribute hours there, right? So we have to draw it like this and say hours. Got it? Okay. Now works on is okay. What other attributes are left? Supervisor. Supervisor is department. Let's wait for supervisor's complex. Why? Let's wait for supervisor. This department. Department, is department an attribute?
No.
Why not? Oh yes, we have a department entity type here. So we relate the employee to the department. Right? So employee works for department. Works for, our department has, it's up to you. Works for, okay, let us write works for. But again, you are going bottom up, so you draw a line just to determine the direction of reading the sentence. Supervisor. Supervisor is what?
Employee.
Is an employee. Very good. So, should I define it as an attribute? I have an entity called employee. So an employee is supervising an employee. I need to draw something. Let me use another color. Let us draw the occurrence diagram just to imagine how things work. I have E1, employee 1, E2, E3, E4, and so on. Now E1 is an employee, supervised by E3. Muhammad is supervised by Ahmed, for example. So, let's draw a link. E1 is supervised by whom? So there is a link. Link from where to where? From employee to an employee. From employee to an employee. So we can do it here like this. From employee to employee. When we link it, the employee to the department works for, we draw a line. Right? A relationship. Now we need to relate the employee to another employee. The supervisor. With a relationship, not works for, but a supervisor. supervises. This one supervises this one. This employee supervises this employee. But it happened that both are of the same, both are occurrences of the same entity type. مش كده؟ So we draw it like this. We call it recursive. Recursive relationship because it relates the relationship to each other, to the same, to itself. Like the recursive functions. Calls itself. So here it relates occurrences of itself. ماشي؟ يبقى this relation is supervised.
And if it has many attributes, we make a
Yeah, if it has attributes, other attributes, we can, yes. Now, before we continue the example and see the dependence, we did not till now identify the what? Multiplicity. So let us see how it must. Let me go back to the exercise, from the first one here. We have department controls the project. Where did we get this? It is here. The department controls what the sentence says. Each department controls what? How many? Numbers. When it says number of, he's talking about numbers. He's talking about multiplicity. When numbers appear in the sentence, it means that we are talking about multiplicity. If you remove number of, if you read it like each department controls projects, so this is the relationship. But how many? This is when it comes any word that relates to numbers. It's talking about multiplicity. So now let us reread the sentence. Each department controls a number of projects. Department controls projects. So each one of the department controls how many projects? Many. So we write it this way, many. Star. Did it say that it does not? How about the minimum? Of course, star is the maximum, huh? This is the cardinality. How about the participation, the minimum? 1. Why? Because he said each department controls, must control. It didn't say may control, it says controls. So the minimum is 1. So each department should be assigned to a certain project to control it. So this is, out of this sentence, clear that we are talking about numbers. We are talking about multiplicity. Right? Did it say anything about projects are managed by how many departments?
Yes, in the colors. I think.
Here it did not mention anything, so I don't write anything. Right? Let's keep reading. He said here, each employee works for one department. So we have the works for relationship. The one employee works for how many departments? One. One and only one. So it's one minimum, one maximum. He has to work for a department. He said each one works for. ما قالش may work for. Works for. So it is one. Of course, when I write it one like this, it's one and only one. One minimum, one maximum. Right? But may work
On
several projects. So there is a relationship between the employee and the project. Works on. Works on how many projects?
One to me.
One. So each employee works on many projects. Let me write it here for the moment. And later on we will know where to write it exactly. Works for each employee works for one department, but may work. May.
Zero.
It may. Maybe there is a project, maybe there is no projects. So it might be 0 to many. Right? Keep track of the number of hours per week that employee currently works on each project. We also keep track of the direct supervisor of each employee. So here, let's talk about the recursive later on. So here is also, out of reading the sentence, we can identify the multiplicity. There are multiplicities that are not mentioned. For example, this one is here. This one is here. For example, the project. It says that the department controls a project. But how is the project? The project is controlled by how many departments? We don't know. Maybe one department, maybe many departments. Right? So we don't know. So we don't know, we write. Nothing is mentioned. When we interviewed the user or the customer, he did not mention this side, this multiplicity. He didn't talk about this multiplicity. So after drawing the ERD, I discovered that there are missing data, missing information here. We don't know how many departments can manage a single project. So I call, hello, Mr. User, here is a question for you. How many departments are allowed for managing a single project? For the single project, a single project could be managed by how many departments? There is a question here, right? So the model tells me what are the minimum amount of information I need to identify, to get from the user about the manual that I'm modeling, right? So if there is something missing, some data, some information is missing, I go and ask. So give me a complete picture about the manual. Get the point? So this is how we are going to draw the ERDs. Read the sentences, identify the nouns and the verbs. Nouns are entity types, verbs are relationships. If there are numbers, then there are multiplicity. Attributes are nouns. Be careful. We only model what's inside the manual, not outside what's outside the manual.
Is there another missing information?
Yes, of course, here. This is missing. This is missing. Okay, got it? Okay, next time, inshallah, we will work on the sheet. Sheet number 2. Let me show you where it is. Here are some descriptions of many words obtained from interviewing users, and we need to model the ERD for each one of those. So please read these carefully. Stop.